that, I'd like to introduce Rich Fowler. Rich is the Director of Catholic Charities and my boss, I'm proud to say. He's going to be our MC for today.
Hey, Kathy.
That's her stuff. She's
Oh,
coming up
okay.
next. Yeah.
Sorry. Giving away the next person's glasses. Sorry about that. Well, first of all, good morning. I thank you all for coming. I add my words of appreciation to what Kathy already said. We are really pleased that you're here. And I'm honored to be invited to be a part of this important day. Kathy told me that I had 5 jobs to do today, and the first is to provide a little bit of a context for what's going on here today, so I'll try to do that. To introduce the speakers, to keep things moving, and so you can't hear me back there. Okay. So if you see me, if you're a speaker and if you see me get up and start walking up this way, that means that it's probably about time for you to wind up. I'll try not to be mean, but I do want to keep things going. I'm supposed to get you to lunch on time. I'm supposed to get you out by 4 or shortly thereafter. So you can judge how I do by whether we get out by 4 o'clock and whether you get lunch on time. So I heard a story a while back that I wanted to share with you. It's the story of 2 brothers, ages 7 and 8, who are in a Catholic elementary school. And they're not bad kids, but wherever there's trouble, they're around. And so the teachers of the 2 boys are having a conversation with the principal. And the principal says, you know, the pastor here has a reputation of being able to straighten out kids like this. Why don't we send them over to see the pastor? So the next week, they send the 2 boys over to see the pastor of the parish. And when they come in, the secretary greets them, and she says, I would like to have the older boy go into the pastor's office, the younger boy wait in the lobby. So the older brother is sitting in the pastor's office. The pastor walks in and walks around a little bit, and he says, where is God? And the little boy shrugs his shoulders, I don't know. So again, the pastor says, where is God? And again, the little boy shrugs his shoulders. And so the pastor walks around a little bit again and gets right down in his face and says, where is God? Well, this time the kid is scared. So he jumps up and runs out, and he runs through the lobby. His brother sees him and chases after him. They run all the way home, into the house, upstairs, and into the closet. Big brother sits down on the floor. Little brother sits down kind of out of breath, and he says, geez, what happened in there? And the big brother says, well, it seems that they've lost God, and they think we took him. It's kind of a cute story, but the reality is that sometimes in our lives, we feel like God is lost. I know that this is not homily time, but when there is something like a tsunami, I mean, a lot of questions get asked about where is God and is God present to us? Or if there is a Katrina, again, those questions come up. Or if some bodies fly airplanes into tall buildings with the intent of killing as many people as possible, we ask the question, where is God? I believe that there are people in this community right now, in the Calaveras Mother Lode community, who are being abused, who are being neglected, who are alone. And they're asking, where is God? I mean, where is the community of people to care about us when we need it? That is why we're here today. I mean, we are here to build a community of people who will say, no, not here, not now, not ever. I want you to say that with me. No, not here, not now, not ever. One more time, let's hear it. No, not here, not now, not ever. All right? That's what we're about today. There are 3 communities of people who need to hear this, and one is the seniors who are like me, who could be targets for abuse, neglect, and shams. And so you're going to hear today about that. It's also for people who are workers in the community, who are like me and like Kathy and others, who are government workers, who are agency workers, and we need to know what's going on. We need to hear about how to recognize the signs of abuse, and we need to find out how do we work together, how do we collaborate, how do we make sure that people are not abused and neglected in our community. There are a lot of resources here, a lot of speakers. We have a wonderful array of speakers who are here to inform you, to help you know what to do, to help you know what to avoid, and I am very pleased to be a part of this. So let's get started. Our first speaker today is Peggy Osborne, and you have the bios. I'm not going to read the bios to you. I went up to Peggy and I said, what should people know about you to introduce you appropriately? And she said that she has worked for years. She's worked for governors. She has worked for state assembly people and state senators. But as she worked in that arena, she became aware of senior abuse. And I asked her, well, why was this so interesting to you? And she said, my mother was sick for 37 years, and I saw what happened in that situation. And so I said, that's what's important, that's your heart. And she has done some wonderful work. I heard her speak last year at the conference that was held in Tuolumne County. She has put together some fabulous videos that we have used over and over again to share information about abuse. And I believe that she is exactly the right person to kick off the day, and she's going to help us focus on self-abuse and watching for the signs of abuse. So Peggy, thank you for being here. Please help yourself.
Do I need to? Can everybody hear me? Everybody says I talk very softly. My children, however, do not say I talk softly. But first of all, thank you very much for that very kind introduction, and thank you very much for allowing me to be here today. I have to tell you that I was here at the conference last year, and I love having the opportunity to be up here with my friend Kathy and the wonderful people of the Ombudsman Group and everyone else in Tuolumne County. I do have to tell you a story, and that is when Kathy asked me to speak, I usually talk about financial abuse. That has been my focus for the past several years. And so Kathy said, Peggy, I need you to talk about self-neglect. And I said, boy, Kathy, that is a great way to start off a morning, is talking about self-neglect. But I'd like to, so I am going to focus on that, but I wanted to touch, of course, a few other different issues. One of the things that I think I wanted to start off with, because the title of your conference today is Elder Abuse Awareness, I wanted to spend a few minutes to enlighten you about truly the scope of the issue that currently exists within the state of California. In keeping with the awareness theme of the day, let me share a few key points. The fastest growing segment of California's population today are individuals over the age of 85. The fastest growing segment and the reports of elder abuse are on the rise. They are on the rise, and this is reflected both in Adult Protective Services numbers. It is reflected in the number of complaints that are filed with the Long-Term Care Ombudsman's Office, as well as the Attorney General's Office of the Bureau of Medi-Cal Fraud and Elder Abuse, where I work. Elder abuse, as we all know, occurs in homes. It occurs in nursing facilities, it occurs in board and care facilities, and it really can occur anywhere. It's important, I think, to realize that it crosses all economic and ethnic barriers. Individuals, one of the things that we find that when we work in elder abuse, one of the most frustrating things about the whole issue is that it doesn't matter whether you're on a TV show or a radio show, or I've had the opportunity to talk to the LA Times or the New York Times or the Washington Post, and they always want to know, well, how prevalent is it? How bad is it really? We keep hearing people say it's on the rise. We keep hearing people say it is everywhere, but what do the numbers show? And I think that all of us that work in this field have a lot of frustration by the fact that the numbers that we see, the numbers that we hear about, are truly just the tip of the iceberg. Because the sad thing is that there are no real main depositories within the state of California that accumulate accurate data on the number of individuals in our state that are being abused. Because of the different reporting requirements, some of the reports go to Adult Protective Services, some go to law enforcement, some go to the Attorney General's office, but there is no statewide repository that can take all the numbers in. I will tell you that one of the statistics that is used throughout the state, throughout the world, for every 1 report made, 5 go unreported. I had the privilege for 3 years to do a statewide public awareness campaign in an effort to raise the public's awareness about elder and dependent adult abuse. We did PSAs, we did radio spots, we did commercials, we did community outreach. And before we did that, we spent a little time spending some time with focus groups in California. And it might not come to any surprise to you, and I never thought I could be surprised, but when you ask focus groups where they rank elder abuse on the scale of the important social issues in the state, it is at the very, very bottom. It is behind teen pregnancy, it is behind domestic violence, it is behind diabetes, it is behind all these other issues that they perceive as social issues. Elder and dependent adult abuse, as far as the awareness factor, is on the bottom. One of the things that we did through the public awareness campaign was the establishment of a statewide toll-free number for the reporting of elder and dependent adult abuse. Because when I did research before this 3-year campaign, California was only one of 2 states in the nation that did not have an 888 number for the entire state to report abuse. The other state was Guam. And I really felt that we needed to step it up, and we needed to move forward and move into a new century and have our own hotline. To date, as of 3 years and about 6 months, there have been over 19,500 calls received to that hotline. Currently, when we look across the nation from the nationwide perspective, there are over 1.8 million people in approximately 16,500 nursing homes. Financial abuse right now is being called the crime of the century. Whether it is the Canadian lottery, which by the way is an over $5 billion industry in this country, or whether it is the predatory lending practices or oftentimes home improvement scams, which you will hear an excellent and very, very witty and insightful presentation from Carl Vega this afternoon. He's the one with all the jokes and all the personality. I just give you the cold, hard facts. But Mr. Vega will share today with you some information about home improvement scams. But the bottom line is that we all know that financial abuse, or all types of abuse, the main perpetrators are family, friends, and caregivers. A very, very sad fact. And the bottom line and the summation to financial abuse, since I'm not supposed to talk about that today, is that what we know is that there is a new scam designed every day, every single day, by individuals that want to separate seniors from their money. It's one thing on Monday, it's a different thing on Friday. Law enforcement cannot keep up with it. The Attorney General's office cannot keep up with it. Local district attorneys cannot keep up with it. And that is why, as far as what I talk about, what I talk to seniors about, what I talk to law enforcement about, is prevention is essential in the area of elder and dependent adult abuse. Because we have to inform individuals and get individuals to report abuse and to help them to prevent themselves from becoming a victim. When we speak about elder abuse, we all know that there are many categories. There is physical abuse, there is psychological abuse, there's isolation, there's abandonment, there is sexual abuse, there is also self-neglect or self-abuse. As I mentioned earlier, the ability to obtain really clear data about all of these different types of abuse and the most prevalent forms gives us somewhat of an unclear picture, but we do know a few things. Like I said, financial abuse is on the rise. financial abuse in the last 5 years has really risen. The majority of abuse, like I said, committed by family, friends, caregivers. The consequences of elder abuse are devastating. There's no way to really substantiate what the true effects of elder abuse are. It can include injury, impoverishment, depression, poor health, isolation, and obviously institutionalization. Abused seniors, not surprisingly enough, in a study that was conducted about approximately 5 years ago, said that the survival rate for elders that are a victim of any form of abuse is extremely high when compared to those individuals that have not been a victim of abuse. The numbers we do have statewide do show one thing, and that is that self-neglect and neglect and financial abuse are the most prevalent. Physical abuse, I think we would all agree. When you look at all the different categories that I talked to you about, how many of you would agree that physical abuse is probably the most recognizable? Yes. It's something that we believe that we can see, whether it is bruising, whether it is marks of burns or cuts or scrapes, or an individual that has not been cared for properly, or physical abuse is much more readily seen than all the other types of abuse. However, one of the interesting things when we look at all these different types of abuse is what we have seen over the years is abuse does not occur in a vacuum, and it is very rarely that you will see isolation or abandonment or physical abuse without also financial abuse and other different types of abuse. It is not just usually one type of abuse that a senior is a victim of. Oftentimes, they all work together, and that a victim of abuse in a nursing facility or a board and care facility is also a victim of financial abuse. Or self-neglecting individuals are also victims of financial abuse. So it's never just one of them. They all seem to work together, and they all are the, not like I said, not one of them, they don't work in a vacuum. A lot of people ask me, and when I do interviews or I do talk on radio shows, one of the things that they want to do, who is the typical victim? What does the typical victim look like? What does the typical perpetrator look like? And I always say, I don't like to do that, because what that does is it gives us the perception that we need to be looking at a specific individual with specific characteristics, and then if they don't fit into that particular category, well, then they are probably not the perpetrator. They are probably not guilty of abusing an elder or dependent adult. Or what does the typical profile of a victim look like? And I think that we need to obviously think outside that, because if we have the realization that anybody can be a victim, then that is the way we need to look at it. However, we do know that there are certain factors that contribute to elder abuse. The social isolation, individuals that are isolated, any type of mental disorder or cognitive impairment, early onset, Alzheimer's, dementia, any type of cognitive impairment. Women over the age of 75 are more likely to be victims, and individuals that are dependent upon caregivers are more likely to be victims of physical abuse and other types of abuse. When we talk about physical abuse, we're talking about, as defined by law, physical assault, sexual assault, unreasonable physical restraint. When we speak about the indicators of abuse, we refer to signs or clues, obviously, that abuse may have occurred. But as I mentioned before, although physical abuse is more readily seen oftentimes, there are also signs of physical abuse that often go unignored because they are perceived as being the result of a fall, as the result of an injury, as the result of a medical condition. And one of the most important things that I'd like to say, and I'll probably say it several times before I leave, is all of us in this room all of us in our communities, we all need to be aware that we do not, there has been the misconception for years and years that we have to know for certain that elder abuse has occurred before we are willing to pick up the phone and make a phone call to Adult Protective Services, to law enforcement, to the long-term care ombudsman. We don't. All we have to really do is suspect that something is amiss, suspect that somebody may be a victim of abuse. It is not any of our jobs as community leaders, community members, as neighbors, as friends, as bankers, to know for certain that abuse has occurred. We just need to have some type of suspicion that something might be wrong, and leave it to those individuals that are trained to investigate, that are trained to talk to seniors, and to really ferret out what the situation is. When we look at the indicators for abuse, such as sexual abuse, the majority of victims of that are women and individuals that have mental impairments. They are likely to be embarrassed, humiliated, afraid, and do not make reports. Often with that type of abuse, the perpetrators are caregivers, spouses, or acquaintances, or other family members. I really don't want to talk about psychological abuse too much. I think we all probably know what that is, the threatening of seniors or dependent adults with punishment or deprivation or humiliation. One of the things that I see a lot is family members that threaten seniors with, the most common is, I'm the only one taking care of you. If you don't give me the ATM, or if you don't let me do this, or you don't let me live in your house and bring all my friends in, etc., you are on your way to a nursing facility. And all of us know, I think, that nobody wants to go to a nursing facility. There's good facilities, I know, but none of us want to leave our home. None of us want to go to a nursing facility. When I was working in the legislature, one of the first individuals that I visited was an individual in Shasta County, and he was a gentleman that lived alone in a small rural home, and he had a caregiver. And he had lived in this home with his wife for, I think, 65 years. His name's Walter. And he had a caregiver, and on the day that I visited him and I looked into his cupboards and just visited with him, he had absolutely no food in the house. And the caregiver was to come and to transfer him from his chair to his bed in the evening, because he loved to stay in his chair because he's a Dodger fan. But he wasn't getting the appropriate food. He wasn't getting his medications. But when I talked to him, all he said to me was, I do not want to leave my home. I am staying here. He would not talk about the lack of care he was being given. He wasn't talking about, the caregiver would buy him food for dinner, but then he would buy him everything that he knew that Walter couldn't eat, and then he'd just take it home to his family. So Walter was left without food. So the threats and those type of things are very detrimental. I won't talk about financial abuse. I did want to mention just briefly, on the table back there are some financial abuse of seniors booklets and some order forms. There are DVDs that I think that he had mentioned earlier in the morning, and I would encourage you to fill out an order form and get a copy of the DVD. It is, if I may say so, it is great. It sends a very good message, and it's a good training tool for seniors. I take it to mobile home parks, I take it to Kiwanis clubs, I take it to anybody that will watch it, basically. But I want to talk about, in closing, the issue that Kathy really wanted me to talk about, and that is self-neglect. See, self-neglect is a difficult thing to start the morning with, but like I said, self-neglect, however, is the most common form of, and it's not really abuse because it's self-neglect, but it is the most common category investigated by Adult Protective Services. One of the things that is surprising to me is I think that we always believe that self-neglect is something, although we know that it is very prevalent in rural areas. And what is interesting when you look at the state, that self-neglect is more prevalent in Sacramento and above in Northern California, but it's also very prevalent in the Bay Area, and then it's prevalent in the desert areas of Southern California. It can happen in rural areas, and what we have seen as a trend in the last several years, it is becoming extremely prevalent in very, very well-established, more upper-class, very expensive neighborhoods, as in the Bay Area. Individuals do not want to leave their home, and they are not taking care of themselves, and they are the ones that do not want to ask for help. Seniors, when we talk about indicators for self-abuse, I think we would all, I could have brought a PowerPoint with you. I could have showed you some absolutely horrendous pictures, and I was not going to do that to start the day. I wasn't going to do that and show you pictures of homes. I think it was a couple weeks ago, the story of law enforcement that had to go into a home where a woman and her son were self-neglectors, and they were also hoarders. They were hoarders. They had animal hoarding. They had a home filled with newspapers. It took law enforcement over 12 hours to dig through the rubble and the rubbish and the newspapers in the home to even find these two individuals that had expired a week before they found them. When we look at indicators, however, I always ask for people to be an eye out, to be vigilant of neighbors where you see, a senior that you haven't seen in a while, a home that has overgrown weeds and is not well cared for, a home that looks like it is in disrepair and needs maintenance, an elderly person or somebody that you used to see in the community, but often you're not seeing them as often anymore. And what happens with self-neglect, a lot of the times, it is perpetrated by a loss that a senior experiences, whether it is a loss of a loved one or a loss of a spouse, something in their life that has changed that makes them unwilling to go out and is more apt not to seek help, not to pick up the phone and make a phone call, not to call APS. Self-neglect, in a really big picture, is one of the most troubling, raises some of the most troubling clinical and legal questions in this state today. And why is that? Individuals have the right of self-determination. Individuals have the right to refuse medical treatment. Individuals have a right to live in whatever environment they wish. They have a right to sleep outside all night on a mattress and sit in a lawn chair all night in the front yard because they cannot get it into their home because it's too cluttered with garbage and newspapers and magazines. However, as a society, we all know we have an obligation to protect individuals and individuals refusing treatment. There has to be the determination made that they have sufficient capacity to make those informed decisions. From a public health standpoint, elder self-neglect has become really one of the most compelling forms of elder mistreatment. When the last nationwide study that was done about self-neglect was done in 1990. But when we do look at some of the things that we do know about what is happening right now, things haven't changed a lot. I know I'm running out of time, but I wanted to share just something that I thought was very interesting when I was doing some research about self-neglect. Is, like I said, it is one of the most significant issues for adult protective services because these are I think APS would agree with me, they are very difficult and challenging cases. They don't just go into a home and see what's happening and walk out the door. They oftentimes have to find placement for the individual. Individuals that do not have sufficient capacity, oftentimes they can be conserved, and that's another whole issue, the issue of guardianship and conservatorships within the state of California today. But the issue of individuals that are self-neglecting has really been at the bottom of the scale when we're looking at what is the cause, etc. Recently, I did hear an individual from Baylor University. She's a geriatrician, and she has started doing a study on elder self-neglect, and she's formed a consortium for research in elder self-neglect. And one of the individuals working on her team is a NASA nutritionist. And some of the things that he has found is extremely, extremely interesting. And I'll just share this with you briefly, that individuals that self-neglect usually have severe nutrition deficiencies. And what they're looking at is they're looking at this NASA astronaut has looked at victims of self-neglect and has determined that they are lacking in certain vitamins, certain folate, certain vitamin D. You see, I really did my research on this, and I'm not going to bore you with this, but this was really fascinating. And they're comparing individuals sometimes that are self-neglecting to the nutrition deficiencies and what some of the vitamins that they lack to individuals that are stationed in unmanned space stations for a certain period of time. But the question then remains, is the nutrition deficiency due to the fact that they are isolated and are not eating properly, and then causes the cognitive impairment? But I think what is encouraging is that we are starting to look at all these questions to address this issue. It is heartening to say that these efforts are making some progress. And in closing, what I really want to say is that, there was recently a case in Fairfield where an elderly lady died. She was being cared for by her son. And I talk about this case because I even went to the trial when the gentleman was convicted. He was a son taking care of his mother. She passed out on the kitchen floor. They found her 19 and a half months later. She had died on the kitchen floor, and he had just walked over her for all those months. But the sad thing, and I think that all of us need to ask in this room today, is why did somebody in a neighborhood go unnoticed for 19 months? We all need to be vigilant. We all need to be willing to call for help. We all need to look out for our neighbors. When you call for help, you're saving a life. There is a proverb that says, if no one calls out, who will open the door? We need to be vigilant. We need to make the call. It is time for all of us to encourage others in our community and each other to call out, and for those that cannot call out, so we can open their door and be of assistance and provide them the care they need and that they deserve. A phone call can save a life. Thank you very, very much. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Time for one question.
See, I told you it's not the self-neglect you don't get questions about.
Back there, please stand up, speak loudly.
So in speaking with other people that we want to engage in this thought pattern about making the call, would it be safe to say that I could tell others that just because you make the call does not mean that those people will be removed from their home, that bad things will happen?
Right.
We can say, it would be safe to say that make the call for help, and it just, all it does is bring troops
Exactly.
to help.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
But it's
Which
not,
is imperative.
It's not always a detrimental thing, it's a support thing.
It is. And I think that it was interesting that you say that, because one of the things in the focus group, prior to the awareness campaign, we had a lot of input from individuals that say, we want to mind our own business, we don't want to cause anybody problems, we don't want to make a phone call and have somebody showing up on somebody's door. But when you look at it, that it can save a life. And those wonderful individuals, APS and all those individuals that perform just wonderful, wonderful services, just like the ombudsman and everybody else. They are trained to evaluate the situation. And how much better is, it can't be any better than getting the help that somebody needs, getting them the services. They can get, assistance with meals and medication and things like that, which would allow them to remain in their home, but to remain in their home safely and not at risk. Yes, they are anonymous. Yeah, you can report anonymously. I'm going to give you the 888 number, which is 888-436-3600. Thank you very much.
I just want to say thank you to Peggy. I thought she did a fantastic job of giving us an overview of the problem and the particularly vexing problem of self-abuse. And my opinion is, and the question sort of comes to that, my opinion is that the issue of self-abuse is not just an individual problem, it's a community problem. A lot of times we treat seniors as if they've been turned out to pasture and they don't have much to live for anymore. And so the society somehow creates the environment in which people can abuse themselves and not take care of themselves. And so Peggy has really done a good job, I think, talking about the increasing numbers of seniors, the increasing amount of abuse and financial abuse, and then focused us on the issue of the community problem of self-abuse. And so let's give her another round of applause. Our second speaker this morning is someone who is very well known in this community and someone who has been working here for a long time. It's Mary Zawicki. Mary is the director of the Calaveras Works and Human Services organization in the county. I asked her what you all need to know about her. She said that she's been working in this community for 37 years. And I said, why? And she said that she believes that the seniors are the people who built this community. I mean, they are the people who should be honored. They should be the people held in esteem. And so she now is here to talk to us about adult protective services and what the county does to try to prevent and stop and support people who are maybe in abusive situations. So, Mary, would you please come forward? Let's give her a round of applause.
Good morning. Good morning. How y'all doing? All right. I was asked to start today. Of course, you know, everybody comes up to you and says, hey, could you do my announcement? Can you do my announcement? So I'm going to do 2 commercials. Okay, the first one is to thank the Public Authority. They've sponsored 57 folks to come here today, and we thank them very much. Second part is the Area Agency on Aging that covers our community will be here around 11 o'clock. They're in the middle of a needs assessment, and they really want to hear your thoughts. And so if you'll help them fill out the surveys, because no offense, every place I go, I tell them, Calaveras is #1. And you want to know the truth? People are beginning to realize that. And so I want to have the most surveys in, because I want all of your opinions in there. And so they can't ignore us at all. Okay? If you, in your packets is a little description of my speech, and if you'd like to move along, because I want to make sure I keep on time. I was asked to first start talking a little bit about the history of adult protective services. And of course, in 1979 was the first time that Congress ever held a hearing on the issue of elder abuse in Massachusetts. Then they waited a little while, about a decade, and in 1988, the U.S. Administration on Aging funded the first National Resource Center, basically trying to put out some information on elder abuse. 4 years later, Congress, in 1992, added language to the Older Americans Act requiring this establishment of a National Center on Elder Abuse. And then in our own state, in 1998, the Adult Protective Services Program was created statewide. Thank you. To respond to issues of abuse and neglect, to establish statewide a system so that, before different counties had different offerings for the issue of adult protection, but there wasn't a statewide system until that time. This law required all the counties to have a 24/7 system, and that it also allowed us for the first time to be able to conduct our investigations with law enforcement if needed. If you were to take a look at the statistics in our state, last year there were 103 reports of elder abuse or neglect. And then locally, yeah, would you mind doing that? I can't talk and chew gum, you know, it's those things that they talk about. It's really true. And then locally, we've had 238 cases last year alone that we reported on to our Adult Protective Services unit. 102 of those were confirmed, which means that those issues that were recommended for us to look at really were true. 114 was inconclusive, which basically means we just didn't have enough information to say one way or the other whether there really was an issue of abuse or neglect. And only 4 could we really take a look and say they weren't true.
I'm going to try to catch up with you. What slide are you on?
I'm already up to reports because I told them no one's going to have to do a time clock for me. I also have a plane to catch. I do apologize.
That one? Is that
We're up to reports, yeah. You're perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to stay right with you.
Okay. One of the things that folks need to know about is that when we do investigations, while we must investigate and it's mandatory by law, the truth of the matter is if people refuse services, there's not much we can do unless the court intercedes and says folks really do have to accept services. And those cases are few and far between. Okay. All right. Sounds good. The workers use a menu of services within the agency when they go out and investigate and take a look at the issues and decide what all folks need. These are some of the services that we offer just within the department in-house. We have medical assistance, food stamps, general assistance for individuals. This past year, the Board of Supervisors was very gracious to give us a rental assistance program so we can pay first and last month rent for folks who are homeless or about to be homeless. We also have the in-home supportive services program, which allows caregivers to go in and allow folks to be assisted so that they don't have to leave their homes. We have veteran services. We also are both the public guardian and public conservator for Calaveras County, where for individuals who need us to provide, let's say, a check writing services, they're not able to do those particular issues but can remain in home, we can go ahead and do those issues. And then this past year, we were really pleased. We've been working with the Public Health Department in trying to get some medical case management added to our in-home supportive services program. And so we were able to get a registered nurse, but primarily right now we're only using that individual for paramedical evaluations because they don't have enough nurses just yet, but we're hoping to fix that issue shortly. We're kind of lucky too because we've been able to contract with the Department of Behavioral Health, and for a number of years now we have a behavioral health counselor in our office. She does a series of group trainings and ongoing services, mental health services for individuals, and we're very fortunate to have her. And just to let you know, people do not necessarily have to be on our program for them to access her groups. We just accept folks if they really want to come into a class, it's okay by us. One of the things that we're really, really, really pleased about this past year is that we've been able to establish 4 outreach offices. And those outreach offices allows us to be closer to the community, to hear, as you heard Peggy talk about, to hear sooner, quicker, faster when people have needs. And that has been an absolute godsend to us. It allows us to make it easier to serve folks from our side, and it allows people to remain in their community and just come and see us in those offices. have, if you'll move on, those are in Arnold, they're in West Point, they're in Valley Springs, and in Copperopolis. Excuse me. Now, 3 of those are in the medical clinics of Mark Twain, so that we are right there when people come in. It's kind of like a one-stop shopping. But I have to tell you, one of the things that we've noticed that we were absolutely floored about as an agency when we opened up the outreach centers was that we began to hear about folks that we've never provided services to before. And some of the folks who have come in to access our service have said, you know, I could never have gotten to San Andreas. For example, like folks who live in Copper and there's no bus service, you know, they had no way to get in. And yet, this allows them the opportunity to be served and to be served more locally, and we're really, really pleased about that. And it doesn't matter what the issue is, whether it's medical insurance, whether it is adult protection, you name it. We've been hearing about people, and we're just very, very pleased about that. Coming soon, we're going to open up an outstation in Mountain Ranch. We also have on-call workers going to the hospital, Mark Twain Hospital. We have workers that are going into the nursing homes. And we also have workers going to the Department of Behavioral Health, because there are some individuals that we are aware of who have mental illness issues, who just, the distance may be only a couple of blocks, but it might as well be an ocean. And so what we've been able to do is to go over to the office when people are receiving services to talk to them, and they can receive services from us as well, and they're more comfortable. And again, it's like going to people's home. That's where folks want to be, in their homes and in their communities. And the difference is now, instead of people coming to us, we're going to them. We're also really pleased that there are a number of in-house services that we've been able to access this past year. We do have the Salvation Army within our own organization. They've been really great. They've given us some funds for individuals, for food, for fuel, for hotel vouchers. In particular, both during the really hot time last year, as well as the really cold time. They provided fans. I think they did about 80 fans, Kathy? 80 or 100 fans. We did heaters during the most recent cold spell. And I want to say truthfully, one of the reasons we were very fortunate and didn't have to open up what some folks call our warm centers in our community during the real cold spell was because the Salvation Army gave us hotel vouchers. They also provided heaters for folks. And so no one had to leave their home. Or if they had to leave their home, they didn't have to go to a mass shelter. They could go to a hotel. And that was really nice. And we were very pleased about that. We, in the fall and winter, have been very fortunate. Channel 10, as well as Scald Shucks, gave us about 800 coats to distribute. And I will not lie to you. I think they were gone in 2 to 3 weeks, Kathy. It was amazing to us. And so, and they have already told us, they've made a commitment that they will be back with us next year. And so we're hoping to set new records, because that's what we like to do. We also keep in-house at all times toiletries. And I just authorized the other day a couple of cases of toothbrushes, toothpaste, you name it. And a lot of service groups have been very good about giving us that. So we have those in-house, and you'd be surprised how often those get distributed. We have some excellent, excellent, excellent community groups. The Loose Thread Quilters Guild of Valley Springs and the Independent Quilters of Arnold have given us lots of blankets. We especially use this in the winter and at holiday season for all of the clientele. And I have to tell you, there are some tremendous stories that we have, particularly from our seniors, who really don't have blankets because of various reasons. Especially if you've been having issues of incontinence or whatever, those blankets go real fast. And these wonderful ladies have done such a terrific job of allowing us the opportunity to have those blankets to distribute, and we thank them very much. We also have the Human Resource Council. Once a month during the really good months of weather, they come with produce trucks, and last year it was standing room only in the entire parking lot because one day was Chicken Day, and so we had hundreds and hundreds of folks in there accessing. So when you hear Peggy talk about self-neglect, I can tell you the lines that we have that go literally around the building when there's produce and in particular when there's meat. There is a big need for food in our community, continues to be. I'm hoping someday we won't have to even talk about that. I'd like to talk a little bit about what we're working on as an agency on your behalf. One of the things that we're working on, as I talked about, was we'd like to really have a lot more medical case management for our in-home supportive services program. We believe that having that ongoing nurse being there can take care of a number of issues and be very, very preventative in catching things early, medical conditions in particular, because many of the folks who are in in-home supportive services program have truly multiple medical issues, and so having that nurse there will really help, in our estimation, create a better quality to the program. We're particularly happy because in the last few months we've gotten together as a community, a financial abuse services team. These are the individuals who are specializing in this issue, and our district attorney, Jeff Tuttle, is back there, and I told him I expect him to lead and do great things with this particular issue. And so these are the folks who are putting it together for us, just to let you know, in our community. And if you ever get a chance, just tell them thank you. In the Department of Behavioral Health, they recently hired someone who will be working with our adult protective services workers when we have to go out on some referrals where we know that the individual is mentally ill. And this is kind of important because we want services for the individual as quick as possible. If they go out when we receive the call on the first team, then we can get those services to those individuals a lot quicker. And hopefully on those cases where someone needs to be de-escalated, that can occur. So we're very, very pleased that this is coming. They've hired the individual. That individual is receiving some training right now and hopefully will be joining us real soon. We've also, this past year, some of you may have read that about a homeless study, needs assessment of our community that we did with Tuolumne and Amador County. And we've been working on that. Our hope is when we finish this project, we are able to receive some funding for homeless services in our community. And right now, we're hoping that it will be for some scattered housing for homeless mentally ill. And in particular, I'm sure there will be some for seniors who are homeless mentally ill. At the state level, I'm the co-chair of the Aging Initiative for the California Social Work Education Center. What that is a group that meets, it's all the deans of the schools of social work, as well as the county welfare directors, as well as the Department of Behavioral Health, the National Association of Social Workers. And what we've been doing is taking a look at, nationwide there's a shortage of social workers, regardless of whatever the topic may be. Our work is to try and look at what we can do to have students come up and be trained in the area of social work, in particular in the Aging Initiative. Our work has been to develop a curriculum for geriatric social workers, so people come to the public welfare system already with that information in hand, because this is a specialty. Nowadays, this is no longer a generic social worker can just go in and anybody can work. And it's because of the complexities of the issues that occur with the aging population. So, and our major thrust is to have folks for public social work. We are looking at the recruitment and retention. Right now, the federal government gives some funding for students who are willing to study the area of child welfare, and then they come back and they provide a certain amount of time in public service in child welfare as their payment for having received some of this additional financial assistance. That does not occur in the area presently for geriatric social work, and we're working on that both at the state and federal level. We're also taking a look, and this is what I'm very much proud of. It's going to be the Social Work Education Center's #1 initiative this year, and that is what we call long-distance learning. What that is, for example, my social workers who are already here don't have the time and ability because they're working necessarily to go off to college classes because they're working and because of the distance from the universities. We're working on trying to create a long distance learning so that they can remain here in the community, receive their classes, be able to do their placement here, and then we keep them. And so we're hoping that that occurs, and we're working very hard on that. And that's actually where I'm going to be flying off to this afternoon. The County Welfare Directors Association this year is asking the state legislature for $20 million to increase our adult protective services funding. There has not been any funding increases since 1998. And I don't know about you, but there's been a few extra seniors and what we call disabled adults who really need the services. And so we're asking them to consider giving us some additional funding so that we can have the services available when people need it. The other part is through the Public Guardians and Public Administrators Association. That group is going for $15 million funding. I take a look at the last few years. I'm very proud to be one of the members who've been working really hard. There's a leadership conference on aging in the state. And in the past, you would have the adult services workers all go to their own separate conference from the area agency folks with with other groups like the advisory councils, etc. We were able a couple of years ago to say, you know what, there is no state plan, so to speak, for aging. And there isn't one department that is looking at comprehensively the issue of aging, in particular as we know that the baby boomers are coming along. And so we had been talking with a number of these groups. We finally got them together in one conference once a year to start having some dialogue about what's going to happen for the future and what we can do together instead of separate. And so that's been a thrust. We'll continue that. We will continue as a group to take a look at trying to have the state look at putting together statewide plans. Right now, I can tell you, if you're a senior and you want services, there are 8 state departments where you would have to go if you were to access or need all of the services that are available to seniors, rather than one particular state department. No one is looking holistically just yet, but that's why we have the leadership conference. We're hoping that we can get people to come together and start taking a look at it. And one of the things we're really proud is this group has taken up the mantra of putting together a white paper on the baby boomers to give to the state legislature to say, this is what you need to think about coming up. And I told you I would be done, because if you notice, the next slide is thank you.
But when Pat holds my feet to the fire on an issue that involves something that's unfair to seniors, or really something that is even slightly off in our community, you listen. She has integrity, and she has a power that comes from the principles that she lives with. And I'm very grateful to call her friend. Pat, congratulations.
Good morning. My name's Tom Tryon. I'm the supervisor for the Angels Camp Murphys area, and my special guest and friend is Emily Stemler. Emily's a fourth generation resident of Calaveras County and Angels Camp. She was born in 1922. She's 85 years old. She has two sons. Both of them have fled the urbanization of Calaveras County and the Highway 4 corridor, and both live in Montana. Emily's family first came to Calaveras County in the 1860s, so she's been here a very long time. She's fourth generation. She spent the last 25 years of her life as the director of the museum in Angels Camp. And I think there are probably some here anyway that attended the grand opening of the addition to the museum last Saturday. And I think if you haven't been to the museum in Angels Camp, well, you need to go there now. They've renovated it and put some new buildings in, have a lot more new displays. And Emily remains the director at 85 years of age. And on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, why I'd like to present you with this plaque, Emily.
Wow, thank you.
Want me to call it out for you? There you go.
Good morning. My name is Russ Thomas. I'm the supervisor from the 5th District. And it's my great pleasure to introduce to you this morning Mr. Bill Albee. Now, Bill has been a very close friend of mine ever since I came to Calaveras County, and he is a tough act to follow. Bill is a retired engineer, worked for some good long period of time with Bechtel, and then finished up his career with PG&E. But he is still very much the engineer. Engineering solutions in Copperopolis, and I admire this man, and I'm really thrilled to have an opportunity to acknowledge his contribution to Copperopolis. Interestingly, Bill is a few years older than he looks, but when were you born, Bill?
Yesterday.
Yesterday?
75 years ago.
75 years ago. And I'm very much an admirer of Bill Albee. If you want to hold somebody up as an example of a person to follow, Bill is it tomorrow that you're taking your pilots?
No, a couple of weeks from now.
A couple of weeks from now? Bill, after a good long period of inactivity in flying, he decided he wants to get his pilot's license, and he's been flying. He's going to take his private certificate here almost any day now. And I don't know, I think that he's really a shining example of a person that really espouses the concept of, I heard years ago that the definition of middle age is when what is behind you is more important than what is in front of you. And if you think about that, Bill's a teenager. And I just really want to thank you personally, Bill. Thank you for all your contribution to our community and to our county.
Oops. Good morning. I'm Bill Claudino, and I represent District 1 as a county supervisor. That's, in case you're not aware, the area that represent San Andreas, Valley Springs person, and Wallace, and I'm not a developer, nor have I been one. You know, I think all of us realize that sometimes the most reliable and hardworking people in a community are those that are the most unsung folks as well, and have a level of humility, and I don't mean humility in a negative way. I like the old saying about humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's about thinking of yourself less. And that describes to a T my guest, Hugo Scotto. Look at him. He's thinking of himself right now. Hugo does a lot of things in the town of Valley Springs, but primarily he's attached to the Veterans Hall down there because that is the community facility for Valley Springs. It needs repair. It has to organize functions. He and his wife, Sharon, who is sitting here, are always available. They never say no. Hugo is a retired contractor, so they take advantage of those skills. The hall is in need of repair, and you can usually find Hugo there doing just that. He's also a pretty good cook, and they cook, he and his wife, Sharon, they cook for almost all the functions there, be they veterans functions or community affairs or what have you. I have never heard Hugo complain. I've never heard him tout his own accomplishments, and I've never heard him say no. But the most important quality that he has is when issues are contentious and he's at the meeting, he is a very leveling influence because he's quite a gentleman. So here's your certificate, Hugo.
Good morning, I'm Marita Calloway. I'm the distaff member of the Board of Supervisors representing the Ebbets Pass corridor. And my guest is Larry Stevenson, who sits on my shoulder sometimes and tells me what's right and what's wrong. No, what's wrong and what am I going to do to help him fix it. Larry is a very active participant in the White Pines Park. In fact, all of these people here, many of you in this room, are what Calaveras is about, which is volunteerism, and we couldn't do our job as supervisors without you, and I know I couldn't do mine without Larry. He's also very active in the Arnold Library. I mean, our new fire station is built right next to our new library. It's 10 years old. We still call it our new library. And there's a drainage problem, and you know, Larry's out there and he's saying, Marita, there's a drainage problem here. What are you going to do about making sure the fire station takes care of this? He's really a knight in silver armor and a gentleman to the core. He expects no recognition, and he does what has to be done, and he's done it for years in the Ebbets Pass area for, as I said, the park and the library, and most of us in the community are really grateful to him, and especially me.